Nice to meet
Yes.
you. This is same time.
Yeah.
Same time. Indonesia and Bangkok, I think. No different. Oke, apa Prof Budi bagaimana?
Yeah. Good morning, Pak Jirayudh. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm good.
Good.
It has
Now,
been a busy week.
are you in campus or at home right now?
I am at home right now, and I'm going into the campus later. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Dia mahasiswa, anak-anakku sekalian, terima kasih sudah. Thank you for joining us today for having lectures by Dr. Jirayudh Sintuphan. As you know that last week we met him, and today we also meet again, and he is talking. He will be giving lectures on the race and colonialism. Before starting our lecture, sebelum memulai kuliah kita, mungkin ada yang mau mengintroduksi tentang hubungan antara relasi etnisitas and colonialism before giving lectures for the students, who wants to give some introduction or some comments on the relationship between ethnicity and colonialism, based on Indonesian experience in colonial times. Jadi silakan sebelum memulai diskusi ini, mungkin ada yang memberi pengantar, kira-kira what do you think about the relationship, race or ethnicities, between this one and colonialism, especially even in Sumatera, Java, and also even in Southeast Asia countries. Silakan.
Excuse me, Prof Budi. May I, excuse me, Prof Budi?
Yeah.
I have asked to the students, so they told me that they will have a question after Mr. Jirayudh give a materi. I have asked them. May if them have any question after you share your materi, Prof Jirayudh, Mr. Jirayudh? Karena kata mereka gini, Prof Budi.
Yes, either, yeah.
Dengar dulu kami Bu, boleh katanya tadi.
Okay, no problem. Okay, Pak Jirayudh, time is yours.
Karena mereka mungkin mau
no
dengar
problem.
dulu katanya. Boleh kan, Prof?
Yep.
Okay. May I saya kasih dulu ininya, Prof, pengantarnya?
Yep.
Okay. Good morning, Mr. Jirayudh Sintuphan. We are happy to see you again in this class for our second meeting, yeah. In which we will discussing about race and colonialism. Good morning, Prof Budi Agustono. Nice to see you. Always in a good health and full of spirit. So maybe your spirit can influence our type of spirit too for today. Okay. Dan kepada anak-anakku semua dan juga mungkin ada partisipan di sini, welcome to this class, to our Zoom meeting. I'm hoping for everyone to be more actively involved in today's discussion. Seperti tadi kita sudah sepakati, saya berharap setelah Mr. Jirayudh Sintuphan memberikan materi, kalian akan aktif untuk memberikan tanggapan dan karena jarang-jarang kita bisa mendapatkan kuliah seperti ini, dan jangan jangan kita menyia-nyiakan kesempatan ini. Now, Prof Budi Agustono will lead our class as a moderator. It is your time, Prof Budi, please.
Thank you. Okay, the time is yours, Pak Jirayudh.
Okay.
Bahasa Indonesia, Pak?
Not very good. Okay, I'll share my screen.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Last week, we were talking about the, definitions of race and ethnicities. And we also mentioned that actually the concept of race and ethnicities was invented during the colonial periods. So apparently the race and colonialisms they both are the tools to Western or European powers to colonize to colonize the world, but it doesn't mean that race and the idea of race and ethnicity was just invented during the colonial periods, the 17th century, because in the indigenous, the people pre-colonial time, we also have some idea of who we are and who our neighbors were. It was not in the same sense as the bigger, the larger, territorial concept, as in colonial periods. Because when we during the pre-colonial times, we were just most of Southeast Asia and most of the world were just city states. For example, Padang and Banda Aceh may not think of themselves as Sumatran, but think the thought of themselves as Orang Aceh or Orang Padang, for example, or in the case of Thailand, we didn't have the idea of who we were as Thais, but we were thinking of ourselves as people as a person from Songkhla down the south, a person from Chiang Mai in the north, or person from Bangkok. But during the colonial period, it has changed all that. So as I mentioned from 2 weeks ago, that the idea of race is not inheritance, so it's not natural. Well, we are not assigned, but biologically assigned the idea, the identity, racial identity or ethnic identity, from through our genes, but it is a socially constructed concept. So one of the most important work on this subject is by an American Japanese scholars called Michael Ome, who studied the idea of racial formation in the United States, and his work argue that the way in which a society categorize the people into different racial boxes, it was for the goals of the society, the social, economics, political goals, and by all means that it also used social economics and political forces to do that. So as a way to put people into their own place, their own boxes. And that happened in 2 levels. One is a micro level, which means a more individual, very small level of us, as individuals, thinking about who we are and how we interact with one another. That is similar to us or different from us. So that so that is a micro level. And then another level is a macro level, which means a larger level of being, for example, belongs to the same kampong, belongs to the same town, belongs to the same province, belongs to the same island, and how we are acting as a whole, as a community, as a person belongs to one kampong, and interact with people from a different kampong. And for this macro level, the tools that are used to create this idea of imagined race or imagined ethnicities. They are, when the people are using, for example, the governmental system. For example, dividing people into province, into residencies, into islands. For example. So this is the idea of racial formations. So I'm showing you the artwork of an American artist. So I would like to ask some the students, when you see this picture, what do you think this artwork, this picture is about? Just one or two, can I ask for volunteer?
Ya, apa kira-kira jika melihat gambar ini apa yang terbayangkan? Silakan berkomentar bahasa Indonesia. I will translate your bahasa Indonesia. Apa yang terlihat gambar ini?
Suatu perbedaan, Pak.
Perbedaan apa? What
Perbedaan
kind of
warna kulit.
different? You said that is there any colors, skin colors is different. Apalagi, what else? Tulis saja di sini. Apalagi, if you see these pictures, what do you think? Apa pendapat Anda? Different head, color, apalagi? Diversity. Yeah, different in colors and many people in the world. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. That is in the right direction. So it's about skin color. It's about diversities. It's about different people. But this is not about any people. But it's about being Black people, African Americans in America. So when we especially from Southeast Asia, we have little chance to interact with people from Africa or Black people. When we see them, we see only Black. But among themselves, this artist trying to show us, within the concept of Blackness, they are different, different color, of Black. So, so that's mean, when we assign, when we call someone, as Black, we are reducing the diversity of different shades of blackness in just to one category or one black. So that's the process. That is a process that we call a process of racializations. As I mentioned earlier, we were not born with a race or an ethnicities attached to us since birth, but we are assigned that by the societies and by the political systems that we belongs to. So in the process of that, racializations often occurred when we want to dominate someone or something, because it's a convenient way for human being, for us to say that this other person's is different from us, and therefore maybe have less values or being less human being than us. So that allowed us to be able to dominate that person. For example, I will speak as a Thai. For example, in Thailand, since the colonial times, we consider ourselves, because and this happened because of colonialisms, that Thailand or Siam was created, and it was described as a Buddhist nation, and a nation of people speaking Thai dialects. So it means that other group of people living in Thailand, for example, the Malay down south, are minorities, and therefore they are less significant, and therefore in order for them to become a part of us, we're trying to reduce the values of their cultures, of their religions, and of their cultural heritage, and ascribe themselves, okay, they are Malay, from the south, and we use education system to create the idea of what being Thai, force them to learn the Thai language, for example. So that is the process of racializations, of creating certain identity and exclude the other. Now, or if we think of Indonesians, maybe we can think of Japanese dominance, or we can think of the Dutch dominance during the colonial period, and in connections to that, when we dehumanize or when we give something values, it means that we are thinking of that object or that of that persons as having an economic values or being a capital. So a sociologist called Oliver Cox has introduced us the ideas about race was invented as a mean to reduce human being into a kind of capital, something that can be accumulated or can be it can be exploited, can be used to create a more capital gains or more values. So in his work called Taste, Class and Race, he examines the idea how black, mostly blackness, African American, African people were reduced were reduced into something that is less human, but become a commodity, become a goods that can be sold and can be bought in order to create more wealth for someone that is of higher values or more like a human beings, like the European or white people. So that was in the beginning of what that was the beginning of the period of colonialisms, which means that Western power or Europeans began to travel out into the world and accumulate and getting more land, more people in order to create their own wealth. So but what was the reason of European colonialisms? It was not just because of they just want wealth, but because of the collapse of their economy, their economy in Europe. Back then in the 14th centuries, which mean 1500 something. There was a pandemic like what we had experienced with COVID for the past 2 years. There was this disease called the Black Death, which killed millions of people, and which stopped the economy back then. Farmers were died, merchants were died, in a large number. So there was no people working in the field to grow rice, or to do anything. So so because of the collapse of the economy in Europe, the Europeans began to travel into other areas in the world to find opportunities, to find some natural resources. Back then it was gold or some minerals, and also to find some way to boost that economy. And when they travel out to Africa, then they saw that the African were very healthy, very strong, and they lived in a very harsh conditions, extreme heat, extreme weather, drought, dryness. They can live in those conditions. So they began to think that actually we can use these people for as labors to produce the goods, the food that we want, and also these places can also be a market for our surplus goods. So that was the beginning of the colonial periods in the world, which started with the colonization of the America, because as student of historians might have heard before, the European think of the America as the new world. Why anything east of Europe was the Indies or Indian, and that's the reasons why Indonesia used to be called Netherlands or East Indies, or the Netherlands or Dutch East Indies, because they think of anything east of Europe, just India or Indies. So with the establishment of these colonies, plantations, farms in the Americas, they want more people to work in the farm there. So that was the beginning of what we call the Atlantic slave trade, which means bringing Black people from this area, from Africa, in order to work into the new colony in America, especially here first in Virginia, in the East Coast of the United States, and then into the Caribbean, which interestingly it's called West Indies, West India. We have East Indies, that is Southeast Asia, was called East Indies, and then South Americas and the Caribbean was called West Indies. So anyone know what this plant is? Anyone know what it is? Yeah.
It is like opium, no?
Yeah, it's like opium, but opium was was not good yet. They had the European hasn't discovered opium yet. So this is tobacco.
Yep.
They're making cigarettes, and it was a big it was a big trade back then, just like microchips or nanochips in this century. So tobacco plants was the goods that everyone wants. So when the European found the colonies in the Americas, then they have realized that that America is a very good has a very good climate to grow tobacco for the European market. Yeah. So that is why they began to grow tobaccos in in a very, vast area. And because of that, they need laborers, to work, on that. To work on that. Initially, they have the European, have brought, white prisoners or people, who were in debt, white Europeans, who was convicted of, some sort of crimes, and put into prisons. And they brought those people to work in this field in the America, because it's far enough from Europe to be able to allow them to walk freely, but work for the government, or work for the people who were granted the rights to run these plantations. So this is what we call white indentured servants. So there are people, white people who were in debt, or who were imprisoned, and they were brought to work in that field. But as the trades grow, those people were not, well, they didn't have enough of prisoners or people who were in debt in Europe. So that is why they were looking for something, for someone else to work in the field. And there was an evidence, well, not evidence, there was a record that the first group of Africans were brought into Virginia, into European colonies in the Americas, and for the first group of that came coincide with the start of tobacco farming in the Americas. So that is how we sort of came up with the idea, with the understanding that that actually capitalisms and slave trades and the idea of race were interconnected. So the people from Africa were enslaved, were captured from their homelands, and then put into the ships, and then you can see the conditions of the ship, the wooden ship. Back then it was not metal, like what we have today. It was made of wood, and a lot of people were chained and put together crammed together inside of those ships. As you can see from these pictures as I show you, and then they just leave. There was no toilet, so they were chained up, and they eat, and they go to the toilet, and then they do everything on that spot. And because of they were wooden ships, so if there is a storm or a typhoon or hurricanes, then the ships would sink. So a lot of people have died because of the slave trades, to transatlantic slave trades, to be working in plantations in the Americas, to produce the goods that the European needs, which would be tobacco, would be sugarcane, because they want sugar, and then working in the mine because they want gold, they want silver, they want precious stones. Okay, yeah. So and all tobacco, sugar canes, and weeds. We call that cash crops. Yeah. Because they produce in such a large number, and then they just want cash in returns. And when they produce a lot of that, when they produce a lot of tobaccos, when they produce a lot of sugar canes, they produce a lot of sugar, they produce a lot of alcoholic drinks out of sugar, out of wheat. They produce a lot of metal utensils to exceed the needs of the Europeans. Then they began to look for new market, and that is why they began to colonize Asia, and they began to colonize Southeast Asia, because they want to have a new market for their goods. So that's why tobaccos on consumptions of sugar that is made from sugarcane was introduced to Southeast Asia, because back then we use palm sugar for most part. But in the America, there was a very interesting incident that was happening in the 18th centuries. Back then, the biggest cities in America was called Jamestown, not New York, not Los Angeles, but it's called Jamestown. It's the capital or the heart of the colonial administrations of the Americas. And as I mentioned earlier, slaves, back then slaves were not just black people, but they were also white slaves, who were prisoners or people who were in debt, that were brought into the Americas. And the conditions of working there was very poor. It's just like working in a very bad factory. So white slaves and African slaves that came together with with a leadership of a person called Nathaniel Bacon, to revolt against the European administrations of the slave. That incident is what we know as Bacon rebellions. So the interesting thing, the importance of this incident, as I mentioned earlier, black and white peoples come together to revolt, to fight for something that they claim that it is their right, it is a better conditions for their own life. So the revolutions was succeeded in some way, but it's also failed considerably, because from that incident, the European administrations began to think of the way to separate white and black slave from one another, so that they were not be able to unite and organize such a big protest ever again. So they began to create a system where white slave would have better conditions, working conditions than the black slave, and have more opportunity in working, in becoming a free man. While black slave will be working in a more in the harsher conditions, and also work in a very heavy work, heavy labors, and also have no chance to become a free man. So that is what we call the Virginia Slave Codes. It was the first law in human history that differentiate people into different ratios, category, being white and being black, and giving different rights to different groups. Yeah, so that's so that incident was very important because then it's sort of a starting point where white people began to think that they have more privilege than black people or people of color whose skins are not white. So that has brought to us to a very important questions during that times. Why Ethiopians black? Anyone knows where Ethiopia or Ethiopians come from?
Africa, Ethiopian.
Ethiopian, where are they from? Where is Ethiopia?
Ethiopia, Africa, but I don't know, not Africa or Southern Africa. But it's Muslim country actually, Ethiopia, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Well, yes, Ethiopia is in Africa, in East Africa.
Yeah, no,
East Africa, but to the north. But if we read the Bibles or the Quran, you will know of the Queen of Sheba, King Solomon's Queen of Sheba comes from Ethiopia and Yemen, and the Ethiopians were Christians, were one of the first Christians after Jesus spread his words. So the Europeans know of Ethiopians as part of the Christian world. But then Ethiopians are Africans. Ethiopians are considered black. But again, they are Christians. So as Christians, we shouldn't killed or enslaved other Christians. So they were trying to find an explanations for that for Ethiopians. Yeah. So there were different explanations for this. For example, one is that even though the Ethiopians are also the children of Abraham, children of the old race, but they are less human being because they are children of Ham, who were cursed, and that is why they've got this blackness in their genes. So it was a theological questions and answer, but again, it provided the white Europeans with the justifications for enslaving the people of color, or treat people of colors as lesser human being than they are. So that is, they began to document all the races in Africa, and also in Asia, and trying to understand different physical features in order to distinguish them, as well as find the justifications to dominate them. And one of a very devastating or a very tragic result of that is the process of the racializations of Rwanda, of people who are living in the country that in East Africa that is known as Rwanda. So in Rwandan societies, pre-colonial times, they were describing themselves as people of three tribes: the Tutsi, the Hutu, and the Twa. Even though they are looking different, but they actually share the same genes. And also during the pre-colonial times, they also intermarried, married with one another, and then moved from one tribes, one categories to the other, according to the marriage, or according to a different social mobility or the roles within the societies. So, but
in progress.
Okay, but when the Europeans arrived, in East Africa and colonized East Africa, especially in Rwanda, they began to racialize the three tribes as separate, and as having separate genes, as having separate origins, and also they began to favor one tribe over the other. For example, from the appearance, the European think that the Tutsi here have physical features that are much closer to the Europeans than the Hutu and the Twa, who are more black Africans. So they began to theorize that the Tutsi actually the Tutsi actually came from outside Rwanda. They were the descendants of Abraham, the descendant of Noah, who who came to Africa and gave the African civilizations. So when the Germans and the Belgians colonized Rwanda and Burundi, so they began the process of giving the Tutsi more privilege in terms of educations. They were the only tribes that were allowed to go into school and having jobs or roles in the colonial government, which created resentment or angers among the Hutus and the Twas. And the three tribes began to see themselves as separate, and the process of intermarriage, marrying across the tribes for the periods of 100 years has ceased to exist. So the three tribes grew further apart. So when the Belgian left Belgian Congo or Rwandans in the 1960s, this is the conflict between different different tribes began to emerge, which resulted in a civil war in the 1980s, which between the Tutsi and the Hutu, who want to claim their own rights and to claim their own dominance in the politics. And it has also resulted in the most tragic genocide or racial killing in these centuries, which is called the Rwandan genocide. Which happened, which began with the conflicts between different race and different ethnicities. The Hutus, the Hutu media began to broadcast in radio programs or television programs about the Tutsis being foreigners and coming to exploit our land, and comparing the Tutsis to rats, to animals that can be killed, and to propagate and gave out the propagandas that Tutsi women were prostitutes, and then they have no values. People, Hutu men can rape all these women and kill all these women. So that was
Pak Jirayudh, can we give a chance to the students to give comment? Silakan anak-anak mahasiswa untuk memberikan komentar yang terkait dengan kuliah ini tadi. Dan terakhir tadi Pak Jirayudh sudah menjelaskan tentang persoalan kebijakan kolonial di Rwanda yang sangat diskriminatif dan sangat eksploitatif antara etnik Tutsi dan Hutu. Kalau if you ever watch film Rwanda, it was very interesting, because I saw that film, Rwanda. It was talking about the genocide in this country. Silakan, ini ada yang bertanya, silakan. Sebelum melanjutkan, before continuing this lectures, please give some comments or question to Pak Jirayudh. Halo. Ada pertanyaan? Silakan Rafael, apa coba dibuka ininya.
Anak-anak mungkin ada yang mau bertanya, silakan aku.
Ada?
Okay.
Sir,
Yeah.
I want to ask a question.
Yes.
Yeah.
Rafael.
For the first, thanks to the time and opportunity that have given to me, and I want to thanks also to Mr. Jirayudh, amazing material that have been given to us. So, for I ask my
Please
question.
speak loudly. Coba agak kuat ya, nggak kedengaran. Coba didekatkan speakernya apa? Rafael, coba diulang lagi.
Let me reply, sir. Thank you for the time and the opportunity that have been given to me. And I want to thanks also to Mr. Jirayudh to very amazing material that have been given to us. So before I ask my question, let me to introduce myself. My name is Rafael Devano Alvarane Baho. You can call me Rafael. My student ID card 220706 and my question is actually, what are the main triggers for racial difference and how we as a millennial student respond to racial difference that often occur? Okay, thank you, sir.
Can you coba diulang lagi apa Rafael pertanyaannya?
Oke. Pak, kalau gitu pertanyaannya boleh saya ketik di kolom komentar aja nggak, Pak? Takutnya.
Ya, karena suaranya nggak jelas. Ya, apa aja di ini aja di chat. You write, you know, on the.
Oke, sir.
Ya.
Okay.
Just wait, no, Pak Jirayudh. What is your question? You know, coba.
Okay, sir. Give me a second. So.
Yap.
Enak juga perlu denger bahasa Thailand ya.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, sir. I'm done.
Yep. Yeah, please, Pak Jirayudh.
Well, what is the main triggers for racial differences? It's all inside our mind. Yeah, it has been, you know, implanted by people who want to govern us. Not just you know, the Europeans, but you know, also kings or you know, politicians, you know, who want, you know, to govern us. Yeah, because when we think of ourselves as different, you know, from one another, just like you know, the incidents of, you know, the Bacon rebellions. You know, when we think of ourselves, you know, as separate, you know, we cannot come together. You know, because you know, once we come together, then you know, we will be able, you know, to unite, to fight, you know, for you know, the whole, and you know, to be able to rise up, you know, to you know, the powers that, you know, trying to dominate us. So you know, what can be, you know, response, you know, to that? I think, you know, we you know, should begin to aware, you know, that the idea of race and the idea of, you know, ethnicities, you know, they were just, you know, socially constructed, and you know, that we are actually more similar than we are different. Now, which, you know, we will, you know, see, you know, later.
Yeah, one more is Why is the different ethnic relationship, always create a conflict? And what is the solution? Yeah. This is the second question.
Yeah. Well, that's that's a difficult question. That's a difficult questions that I don't think even the UN can give the answers. But it was also similar answer that we need to recognize the differences, and also we need to recognize that we are actually have more in common than we are different, and we also need to know what is the real enemy. Yeah, for example, in this case, when we were talking about race and capitalism, that our real enemy is not white people. It's not it's not the Chinese, not the Thais, but in fact it's just this elite who control the capitals, who want to control the world, who want to control the economies, who want to control the politics of the world.
So what is the solution, sir?
Huh?
What is the solution? When the elite control the wealth?
Well, that's why we need to come together and unite.
Yeah.
Just like President Sukarno established the non-alignment movement or the Bandung Conference in the 1960s. Yeah, that was the beginning of the global South trying to come together to create their own paradigm, their own power.
Yeah.
But as you can see, that the Europeans or the Americans and the powers, they wouldn't allow us to do that. They're trying to undermine that non-alignment movements all the time.
Okay, the third question is, I think, regarding the South Africa today. What is the roles of the white people in the South Africa today? Yeah, this is the third question.
Well, I think in South, but because the conflict in South Africa is also sprang from the same source, that is racial capitalisms, and in South Africa now today, it's a kind of reverse, because then you will see that a lot of white people has become become a part of the underprivileged groups. So I think in the 1990s and early 2000s there was still this conflict between black and white, but I think now today they are trying to find a way to reconcile the two groups and to provide a greater mixing between the white and the black people, and try to make them see themselves as Africans or South Africans, in order to create a more powerful economies and also political powers in the international relations.
Yeah, One more is how the Bacon rebellion, did take place at that time.
How? Oh, okay.
Bacon rebellion did take place at that time.
Okay. How? Because well, one part of the reason was the working conditions of the white and the black slave, which was very poor, and also what the prospect of life, of being enslaved, for eternity, and also it's and also it was instigated by Nathaniel Bacon, who was actually a part of the elites, but he was in conflict with the governor of that times, because when when the Europeans came to North America, to the Americas, they were made some agreement with the indigenous or the Native American, that the Native Americans were also allowed to live in the areas, but then white people want to some of the white slaves want to drive the Native American away. So it just creating another conflict. That's all.
Okay, the last question is Surya Dharma, Jirayudh, how to deal with the problem of racism.
Oh, how to deal with the problems of racism. From which perspective? From us being being the object of racism, or
it's the object of racism.
Yeah. Well, if for us being the object of racism, the best, well, for me personally, I would just laugh it away. Yeah, I would just laugh it away. But as a person who producing racism towards the other, then that is why the educations about race and about ethnicities, about colonialisms, is very important. And because of that knowledge and and the way in which we discuss openly about these topics, it will bring us to some sort of future mutual understanding. Yes, it's a very serious problems, and it cannot be resolved easily, because we are living in 2023 now, and the concept of race was invented in 1600 something. So it's 400 years of this idea being put inside our head. So it will take time to change that idea. Okay, shall I continue?
Yep, continue.
Okay, so this is the pictures from that incident, Rwanda genocide.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's just very graphic. Yeah, so, but it needs to be shown. But now we're coming back to our regions as well. As I mentioned earlier, the colonizations in Southeast Asia occurred in a much later period, after the Americas, because we were first seen as the new market, for their goods, and also a new resources, for different types of business. So it's the same process, when the European powers came to Southeast Asia, and they began to create these narratives as Southeast Asia being Indochina, being a meeting point of the greater civilizations of China and India. And that we had no we had no culture, we had no civilizations of ourselves. Even when we call people in our areas, they didn't call us as we call ourselves. We will call, for example, they will call us the Indies, the East Indies, and they will call us the Indo-Chinese. For example, the Southeast Asian mainland always be called the Indo-Chinese, while the Nusantara, the Southeast Asian islands were called the Indies, the East Indies. For example, so they began to create that the narratives that we are being established, we are being backwards, and that is some reasons why they have to colonize us and better ourselves, and I think, and if you can find this book, it is a very interesting book. It's not perfect, but it is a very good project that Mr. Farish is trying to provide the narratives of how race the concept of race has been introduced to Southeast Asia and legitimize and being a tool for the Europeans to colonize Southeast Asia by creating different races in Southeast Asia, especially in the Malay or Nusantara world. Oops. No. So no, I think you all know this word. But then most of us will know that Bahasa Indonesians and Bahasa Malayus they're similar. But when we're speaking of Filipinos, we often think of them, people from the Philippines, as separate. But if you're looking at this word, you will see that Tagalog have more. The national language of the Philippines has more in common with Bahasa Indonesia and Bahasa Malayus than we thought that it was, and this is because of if we go back to the book by Farish Noor, he was they were and Peter Carris, they were trying to explain, how the Spanish colonizations of the Philippines and the Dutch colonizations of Indonesia and the British colonizations of Malaysia were trying to create different races between the Filipinos, between the Indonesians, and between the Malay in Malaya, for examples. And in the process of the colonizations of Southeast Asia, two things happened. One of the things is that, as I mentioned earlier, during the pre-colonial times, we in Southeast Asia, we didn't have the concept of a nation state. A nation states like Indonesia, Malaysia, or Thailand, or Vietnam, as we have today. But we were living in a cultures of city states that were linked together by trades, by religions, or by some sort of intermarriage between cultures. The best examples would be for example, Malaysia. Malaysia was just created by the British, but before that it was just Singapura, was be Pahang, Kedah, or Patani, which, although speaking Malay, but they were not the same country. It's just different cities, states, different areas that connected to one another. But the process of colonizations of Southeast Asia, for example, the Spaniards unite in all different islands of the Philippines, 7,000 islands of the Philippines together into one entity, into one identities, or the British putting different cities in Burma together, even though during the pre-colonial times, this part of Myanmar will feel more affinities, or feel much closer to Bangkok, or the green areas here, for example, Pulau Pinang and Kedah, for example, they will feel more affiliations with people here in Thailand than up north, than for example the Malay from Pahang, for examples, and even though Thailand was not colonized by any power, its border and its identities has also been shaped by colonialisms. So that is why we became Orang Siam, we became Siamese, we became Thai. Eventually, even though in before the pre-colonial times, we don't feel that we were a part of the same country or the same community. For example, people from the south of Thailand will feel much closer to people from in the north of Malaysia, or the people from the northern part of Thailand will feel much closer people who are living around here, for example. So that's they both unite and divide. And another thing that happened during the colonial period is that they were further migrations from of people from China and from British India into Southeast Asia to work in the productions and in the field of in the colony. For example, the Indians were brought into Malaya to work in rubber plantations, and the Chinese were brought in to work in minings, in trades, for example. So with this new migrations, it's they also produce new groups of people. For example, the people of mixed race, the Mestizo, in the Philippines, the Indo in Indonesia, or back then Dutch East Indies, or the Peranakan in most part of Southeast Asia, including Thailand, and also Thai of Indian origins. So with the creations of this mestizo or mixed race groups, you will see that there's a new terminology or a new categorizations happening here. Back then, we will have just black and colored. No, not black, white, and colored, or black. And now, we have, the people who we call, the gray race, the gray area as well. So these, ideas, will answer all of your questions earlier. What the colonial power did and still does now today is that they introduced a policy called the divide and rules, which happens during that Bacon rebellions, that they began to we cannot allow people to come together, because when people come together, that it will create such a force that can change the world. So we have to divide them. So we have to divide them in order to rules them properly. For example, that the Dutch divide divided Yogyakarta, from Solo, from other from other places. The Spaniards divide the Filipinos from other Malay from other Malay tribes. The French and the British divided Laos and the Shan states and northern Thailand together, for example. So that we think of ourselves as separate, and then we fight one another. And then we wouldn't think twice about coming together and join hands to work for something. the divide and rule policy began in British India when well, because in the British India, when the British colonized India, it was because of trade. They just want the new market and the new resources for their industrial revolutions. So back then, the divisions between the Muslims and Hindus was not as strong as it is now today, because of under the traditional Indian government, the Muslims and the Hindus were having equal rights and equal opportunities in the society and in the government. But when the British came, the British came with the idea that we have to divide. We had to divide them. We had to create fear. We had to create hatred. We had to create vanities. For example, we had to create that the ideas that the Hindu is the oldest and came before the Muslims, and they also favor the Muslims than the Hindus in terms of giving them the opportunities in the government or in trade. And then they created the fear and the hatred between the Muslims and the Hindus, even though genetically they are the same group of people, but it's just because they are adhering to different religions. So they're creating that ideas through the medias, through the way in which they have given more privilege to other group of people. So when the society, when the people is divided, it's easy for them to govern. As I mentioned earlier, it's one of the process that took place first in India is the racializations of religion. So even though, as you can see, they look very much alike, but they are separate by religions. There is a narrative that a new narrative has been invented that somehow religions and race are connected, and that one religion can have more privilege than other religions, which in this case, in the case of India, has resulted in a very tragic event when India gained independence. And as the ties, I also have to think about the separations between the Buddhists and the Muslims, and since the colonial times, or in Indonesia, which is such a diverse countries, and why such events like what that happened in Ambon decades ago can take place. Yes, and during the colonial periods, apart from the racializations of religions, they also racialize space, which means the place where we are living, and in the colonial society or colonized societies, people, were put into different part of the city, different parts of the country, and they were assigned the space and the place were assigned some sort of race. For example, the divisions between Bali and Lombok that occurred, or the divisions between much of southern Thailand and the three Islamic provinces of southern part of Thailand, for example. So each race will have a place to stay, have a place in the societies, have a place to be in the society. So the best example would be looking at the map of the city. For example, this is the map of Manila, the capital of the Philippines. It is probably the earliest racialized space in Southeast Asia. Now, for example, when you see here, this is what the Filipinos call intramuros, or the city with the city within the wall. As you can see that the wall were built around a settlement, and then there are several fortifications to separate people who are living within the wall and other people who are living outside of the wall. So people who were living in the wall of Manila were Spaniards, colonialists, or Filipinos of mestizo or mixed blood, for example. And for the indigenous tribe, they will have to be outside the wall, and with this river. So the Chinese and also other ethnic groups, we have to live on the other side of the river. So this is the first racialized space in Southeast Asia. But the best example and the most systematic one, which became an example for every colonial city around the world, is the planning of Singapore by Raffles. So when Raffles, when the British or Raffles colonized, settled in Singapore, Singapore was just a wide place, and then a lot of people were living side by side. So they at the beginning of the colonial period in Singapore, so there were a lot of uprisings where people of different ethnicity come together to revolt against the white colonial rules. So Raffles came up with the idea of trying to organize society in such a way that such a gathering of different groups of people would not happen. So they decided on creating a very well planned, a very well designed Singapore, where different races were put into its own place, and has its own boundaries of roads and on rivers and canals. For example, as you can see in the center, this is centers of Singapore, with a church all together. So this is the administration's quarter, and then you have the European town, which is separate from the Arab kampong and the Malay kampong and the Bugis kampong, which is which are separated by road, and on the other side of the river you have Chinese, you have Indian from southern India, you have Kering from the eastern part of India together. So this was how Singaporean society was designed by the colonial period. So that different group of people have their own place, no mixing, no coming together. So that's create a separate of identity. So if you go back and study the archives of that period, you will see that a lot of the Arabs will have problems with the Malay, and then there will be a fight between the Indians of different tribes or with the Chinese. So that has become the models or the plans for other city plannings around the colonies. For example, Batavia, or Jakarta, which have the Benelux in the States, and the Chinese, where the Chinese supposed to be, and where the Europeans supposed to be. And as you can see, from this map, you will see that there's different densities. For example, the Chinese quarters, there will be a lot of people living in there. Why the European quarters have much more space, have park, have town squares, and living in such a luxuries. So which means that race and colonialisms is also related to inequality in the societies. How the slum happens, how different races has different rights, for example, and the greatest tragedies of them all was when the space or the land was ascribed or racialized through religions. And that is the partitions of India, and in this case, in this photo, is the partitions of Bengal, which is now which is now a country of Bangladesh and the state of Bengal in India. Even though they are the same group of people speaking the same language, sharing the same cultures, it just happened that the majorities of people who are living in the eastern part of the states adhere to Islam, and the western part of the state, and the majorities of them. When I'm talking about the majorities, it would be for example, 51% Muslim in the eastern part, and 49% Hindus and other regions, and also 51% Hindus in the western part, and 49% Muslims and other religions. But the British consensus, I think that it should be separated, and because of the partitions of Bengal, through the religions or sectarian lines, it created the ideas of how a country or a race can be defined through religions, and that has resulted in the partitions of India in 1947, which was one of the greatest tragedies in the world, where people has to fled their homelands and got killed because of religions differences. Now, so as I mentioned earlier, is that somehow race capitalisms, race colonialisms is interconnected with global disparities or global inequality, because the world system that we are living in is based on slavery, is based on the exploitations of human being, of human being who were racialized and who were dehumanized to be less than the Europeans or the white people. And again, Oliver Cox, he's studying the history, the economic history of the world, and Cox also explains that the United States influence in the world has grown since the First World War, and it also has because of the economy in the United States that has grown into such an extent that the market within the country is not enough, so that is why they had to go out into other regions, for example, South America first, and then come to Asia and to Africa, and in order to find the market for their overexpanded capacity, or for their surplus goods, and that influence has grown considerably, after the Second World War, for example, and because it is based on slavery, on exploitations. You can see that there are still exploitations, either by other global power, for example, the Chinese, in Africa, or even in Southeast Asia. That how are we going to deal with that? How are we going to change that? And as I mentioned earlier about the Bandung conference, about the non-alignment movement, how it was undermined by what we call global powers. Why? Because the global powers the global powers want to retain the status quo, to retain the power that they have had for centuries. They don't want the global South to rise up. Because they want to separate the global South. They want to put the global South, us, in our own place. So that is why we will never become a developed nations, because the definitions of what become developed nations has always changed according to the Euro-American powerhouse, and people in the global south are still being exploited through trades and labors, depth through the organizations as the World Bank and the IMF, which has never been questioned about about its ideologies or the real power behind these institutions. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I've just read an article in the Kyoto Reviews about ASEAN. ASEAN is revered by the whole world, although ASEAN has a lot of flaws, but still ASEAN is still revered by the whole world, about how different countries or different races that has been divided can come together and to create a negotiation power that is of a certain importance. But again, because of the way in which we have been divided by racial capitalism, by colonialisms, that is why ASEAN still cannot achieve its real capacity. So in that piece, in that article in the Kyoto Reviews, they urge us, Southeast Asian or people of the ASEAN, to actually think about colonialisms and how colonialism has divided us and ruled us and make us not being to come together as a whole, as a one true communities with enormous power that it should have. So this is the end of my presentations today. Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, there is a question, Pak Jirayudh.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, 2 questions. Nicholas. Oh, what prevention is most likely to take? Yes, as I mentioned earlier, the prevention is that we need to talk about race. We need to talk about ethnicities, and we need to understand that all these concepts are just imagined, and that instead of trying to think in such a grand scales, we may think of some activities that will help us, understands, that we are, more similar than different. I give you one example. There's a project by my friends, who are living in Jerusalem. They are both, Jerusalemite, or people who have been living in Jerusalem, for hundreds of years. One is a Muslim Palestinian, and one is a Jewish Palestinian living in Jerusalem. So what they did is that they're trying to unite people of Jerusalem of different religions through narratives about their life and their food. So they began this project about Jerusalem food, Jerusalem cookbook, that different household, whether Christian, Muslims, or Jewish, share their own recipes, their own stories about food, and then from that project, so different communities actually began to realize that, oh, we may be different in terms of beliefs and religions, but actually we are eating the same food, we are sharing the same recipes, we are speaking the same language. Arabic and Hebrews, even though it has been categorized as two different languages, but we are actually share a lot of vocabularies, and also sharing a lot of connotations, humor, for example. So that is one of the few examples of how we can think of the projects to prevent that. And from that project, it's also countered the Western narratives about, oh, Jews, Muslims, and Christians, they are different, and it is a crash of civilization that cannot come together. But in fact, they can come together, they can join hands, and they can live alongside one another. Yes. In association with the president of the racial scholarship sometime because in some country. Okay. Yep. As a student, actually not as a student, or not as a student, but as a human being. I have no theory for this, but I can speak from my own experience. I will think of myself first, think of the thing that I don't like, think of the things that I don't want to happen to myself, and I will promise to myself that I'm not going to inflict it. I'm not going to do that to other person. If I don't want, if I don't want myself to be the object, the victim of racism, I will not inflict it, racism to other people. But again, we have to also to understand that it's it's not easy, to erase this 400 years old ideas that has been implanted in the human mind, and if we are and if we have become the object of racisms, my advice is just laugh at it.
Okay, I think time is up.
Yep.
Thank you very much for all the questions, especially for Pak Jirayudh, who has already given insightful thought or insightful narrations about the race and ethnicity. Regarding the next meeting, the next or the last season, would it possible if we have a meeting on the May 5th, 5 May or May 5th at the 10 to 11:40, sir?
Yes, that's convenient for me.
Yeah, is it convenient?
Yes.
5 May 5 at the 10 to 11:40.
Okay, yes, 10 to
Okay,
11.
thank you very much. We are designing a flyers for the next meeting. I hope today, especially Friday, is in Indonesia, the weather is very, very shining, and I hope that this lecture can be brought can brought the students' mind horizons to strengthen their thinkings of race and ethnicity. Thank you very much, and see you next week at the same. Yeah, thank you very much. In the next week. Thank you. Bye, Pak Jirayudh. Bye.
Thank you,
Bye
Jirayudh.
semuanya. Thank you.